An investigation commissioned by the National School Boards Association confirmed what many of us knew, or at least suspected all along. The association worked closely with the Biden administration, leading up to its written request to the president for federal law enforcement at school board meetings. Though the letter to the president contained plenty of inflammatory language, including the request for government to potentially prosecute parents who demonstrated at school board meetings as, quote, domestic terrorists under the Patriot Act, the investigation actually revealed that a previous draft of the letter even called for the deployment, are you ready for this? The National Guard and military police to certain districts. When did parental rights become a crime? In fact, when did it become a national emergency where you got to call out the military? Now the School Boards Association has admitted this error, and they're apologizing. Why? Because, let me tell you why they're responding. Why they're apologizing is because you, along with many others, started talking to local school boards and state school boards and saying, are you a part of the National School Boards Association? And they were, and many of them withdrew because of your involvement. Well, joining me now with more on this report is Meg Kilgannon, Senior Fellow for Education Studies here at the Family Research Council. Okay, Meg, see if you can get me worked up even more.
You don't need me. Just keep going. You're doing great.
What did you find? What did you find in this report?
Well, I'm always suspicious of reports that are generated by the organization investigating itself, which is what this is from the National School Boards Association. But I think that's probably about all we're going to get. And they are laying the blame for this debacle squarely at the feet of the unfortunate Chip Slavin, who was the acting executive director at the time and used to work for Representative and former West Virginia Governor Weiss. And there was collaboration with people in the White House and at the Department of Education about this letter, about the need for this letter. And they see these folks just were totally shocked that parents were upset and coming to school boards and expressing their concern. And, the situation with State Farm is a great example of exactly the kind of thing that parents become very engaged and upset about. And where are they supposed to take their concerns, but to their local school board, to the people they elect to represent them in the system. So I think it's good to explain really what is the National School Board Association. Every state has an association for school board members. And, people who are elected to school board aren't necessarily education experts, thank goodness, right? That's what we like about them. But the State School Board Association is there to provide technical assistance. It's a membership organization. The school boards pay dues into the system. And then the National School Board Association is a federal level organization that is supposed to be a resource for those state associations. And so for example, what's going on now with Title IX. The Biden administration is going to revise this rule, and that's going to have an impact on local schools. And so in theory, the National School Board Association would be explaining something like that to state school board associations who then could help local schools navigate that situation. But that's the rainbow version of what should happen. That's not actually what has happened in this situation. They got way outside their lane. The pandemic happened, and parents were not happy about lots of things. They weren't happy about content. They weren't happy about children being masked. They weren't happy about schools that were having vaccine requirements. They weren't happy about critical race theory and queer theory in schools. There were lots of problems going on, and parents were coming and engaging with the school board about the situation. And so the response to that at the national level, instead of wondering, wow, have we overstepped? Should we be taking these concerns seriously? Are we out of touch with the public in terms of what we're doing in schools today? No, none of those questions get asked. They immediately, the knee-jerk reaction is to have the federal government step in and corral parents. It's just incredible to think.
Well, Meg, as I look through, you're right. This is an independent review, so they were hired by the National School Board. So, you take it with a grain of salt. Although, I will say that even reading this exposes the bias. I mean, they admit that they were predisposed to be partisan in their approach. I think the only thing that is bringing about this, I'm not even going to say reform, because I think it's just a matter, they got their hand caught in the cookie jar, and they're trying to keep from losing any more money from state organizations that withdrew their membership. But it makes very clear here that, in fact, the president, I was reading a part of it, the president himself called the president of the NSBA board to thank her after this letter came in. Now, the report also said, the independent report, and I'm reading from the NSBA, I'm not reading from the news articles, I'm reading from them, that there is no, they quote, this is quote, did not find direct or indirect evidence suggesting the administration requested the letter. So they couldn't find it, that it was there. It was kind of silent. It was interesting in reading the Washington Post. The Washington Post was definitive in saying that the group was not acting at the White House's behest. That's not what the report said. It said that they found no evidence that the White House asked for it. The Washington Post obviously taking that to try to defend the White House. But this conversation going back and forth, I mean, I would be surprised if this letter had not been requested by the White House.
Well, it certainly there was pressure to do something. The report also points to the National Association of Secondary School Principals as being the first people to call for federal relief from the parents who were coming into the school and complaining about this or that issue that we just went over, what if they possibly could have been. And so there's certainly this was a huge problem for the Biden administration. They had made a big promise to get schools open again, and schools weren't opening again, and they were making it even more difficult for schools to open. And you had all of the backdoor collaboration with the American Federation of Teachers. It was later revealed had reviewed the CDC guidance on opening schools and made it more difficult for schools to open with that guidance. So to imagine that there was some sort of collusion with the administration is really not terribly difficult. They have a record of engaging with their friends.
Yeah, it could have been that the NSBA approached them first, but clearly the White House coached them on what was to be in the letter. There's no doubt. In fact, I think it shows that occurred, that there was those conversations going back and forth.
Well, and the immediacy of the response from the Justice Department of all places, when when the letter was received and it's issued on, I think, September 29th, and by October 5th, they have a response from the Attorney General himself to their request. That never happens.
Nothing moves that fast in Washington.
No.
The part of the, as you said at the beginning, they've kind of thrown the former interim director, Chip Slavin, kind of under the bus here. They blamed him for it. But, they said he was responsible for the origin and substance of the letter, but it was also reviewed by 4 board members. So others looked at this letter. So he didn't act totally alone. Now, it shows that he didn't run it through the review process as normal. At least that's what it says. Do we know if anyone here associated with NSBA has been, quote unquote, rewarded by the Biden administration?
Well, there were 2 signatories on that letter. It was Mr. Slavin and then Dr. Viola Garcia, who is now at the National Assessments Education Board. She was in the running for that job, according to the report. She was in the running for that job before the letter, came to be or was even discussed. And she did, in fact, go on to get that job after it was over. So even if that job wasn't necessarily a reward for the letter, she certainly wasn't punished by losing the job for her involvement in the letter. So I think that the question of whether or not they had close ties with the administration isn't a question. They did.
Yeah.
They did.
Yeah. So, Meg Kilgannon, let me ask you this question. Are there alternatives to NSBA being developed so state associations won't have to rely on now what is clearly known as a left-leaning Biden apologist organization?
There is a consortium of state school board associations that's formed. There's not a lot of information about them on their website, but it seems to be a pretty quickly formed alternative to the National School Board Association. I think it's probably going to turn out to be of the same sort of more liberal stripe that the National Association of School Boards is, National School Board Association is. There are efforts all over the country to form alternative state level associations. The Noah Webster Educational Foundation is working on that. Family Research Council with Action. We participated in a training in Virginia for newly elected school board members. There's an effort from the Heritage Foundation. There are all kinds of folks in this space working to give information to school board members who need it about how to do their jobs. And you know, they do need technical assistance because education policy is
Right.
complex by design,
Right.
right? Nobody really wants you to understand what's going on. But school board members who are elected and they know what to do. They know the result that they want to achieve, and it shouldn't take an outside organization to empower them to do that. The superintendent staff and everyone working in the school system should be working together for the benefit of children and families, and so that children are learning and that we're not, you know, having assessment scores that go lower and lower every year instead of starting to rise again.
Right. Well, the good news, Meg Kilgannon, is we now know. We know better than we've ever known before what's happening in classrooms all across America. Equipped with knowledge, we can make a difference. And we see parents doing that all across the country, running for school boards, getting elected, and successfully changing those policies. And as you mentioned, FRC Action, a part of that. Meg, we're out of time. Always great to have you on the program. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Tony.